In the darkest corner of the galaxy, hidden in a remote system far from Earth, a young girl named Mira found herself trapped in the cold steel confines of a galactic empire slave camp. She was only 10 years old, but her eyes carried the weight of 1,000 battles. There was fear in her gaze, but there was something else too, a spark of defiance, an unbroken spirit that refused to bow to the cruelty around her. Mira wasn't the only one. The camp was filled with other human children, all stolen from their home planet, Earth. Their existence was a quiet testament to the Empire's power. The aliens who ruled this part of the galaxy were merciless. They saw humans as nothing more than tools, perfect for labor, entertainment, and worst of all, gladiatorial combat. The children were forced into brutal training, turning them into warriors for the amusement of their alien masters. But Mira had never given in. Despite the odds, she clung to the memory of her home, a place she couldn't even truly remember but still longed for. One night, as the cold winds of the alien planet howled through the camp, Mira stood at the edge of her prison cell. She had been here for what felt like an eternity, but her determination never faltered. She had heard rumors, whispers of rebellion among the enslaved. They spoke of a way to escape, a way to fight back. But there was always a price to pay. Her thoughts were interrupted by the echoing sound of an announcement system. It was a familiar voice, one that had become as much a part of the camp as the towering alien structures. The voice belonged to Vexarvos, the cruel alien overlord who ruled the camp. He was responsible for the capture of hundreds of human children, including Mira. But today, he wasn't speaking to the prisoners. He was addressing an audience far beyond the camp's walls. "Tonight, we have something special," Vexarvos announced with a sickening grin. "The human child, Mira, will fight for your amusement. Watch as she proves that even the weakest species can be molded into warriors." A screen flickered to life, and a live feed of Mira's cell appeared in front of thousands of alien spectators. It was a twisted show, a sick game for Vexarvos and his followers. The children had been trained to fight in an arena, to battle until only one remained standing. Each fight was a brutal spectacle, each victory a step toward freedom or death. Mira, though small and fragile, had survived longer than any of the others. But tonight, something was different. Her heart raced as the door to her cell opened, revealing the dark, metallic corridors of the camp's arena. Mira's feet were shaky, but her hands clenched into fists. She had no choice. This was her life now. But deep inside, she knew something had to change. There had to be a way out. As she walked into the arena, her mind raced. The crowd's deafening roar surrounded her, and she could feel their eyes on her. She was their entertainment, nothing more. But Mira wasn't going to play by their rules anymore. In the arena, she faced a much larger opponent, a brutal alien soldier named Gorthok. He had killed countless children before, and today, Mira would be no different. He towered over her, his alien armor glistening in the harsh light. He swung a massive weapon in her direction, but Mira was quick. She ducked and rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. For a brief moment, she saw a glimmer of something in the crowd, something that sparked hope in her heart. In the crowd, a few humans had managed to infiltrate the arena's hidden cameras. They were Earth's last line of defense, a group of covered agents working undercover to gather evidence of the Empire's atrocities. They had been watching Mira for weeks, silently planning a rescue mission. They had already intercepted signals from the camp and confirmed that human children were being enslaved, forced into gladiatorial combat. They knew they had to act before it was too late. But with each passing day, the situation was growing more desperate. The Empire's power was overwhelming, and Earth had no way of fighting back, until now. As Mira continued to fight for her life, the agents back on Earth were working quickly to send a message to the United Earth Defense Forces, UEDF. They had intercepted the broadcast of Mira's fight, and it had been enough to convince the UEDF that there was no turning back. The time for diplomacy had ended. Earth had to act. The UEDF leaders gathered in a high-security command center. The screens in front of them flickered with the images of Mira's fight, her bravery in the face of certain death, stirring something deep inside them. One of the generals, Commander Riley, stood up. His face was grim as he addressed the room. The decision was made. Earth would send its most advanced fleet to the Empire's heart, to the very system where Mira and the other children were held captive. The UEDF had been secretly preparing for this moment for months. They had developed new technologies, cloaking devices, AI-guided weapons, and powerful drones that could match the Empire's firepower. They knew the risks, but there was no turning back now. Back in the arena, Mira's fight was far from over. Her opponent was relentless, but Mira's will to survive burned brighter than ever. She dodged another attack, this time taking her opponent's weapon and turning it against him. With a swift, precise movement, she struck. Gorthok fell to the ground with a heavy thud, and the crowd went silent. Mira's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't allow herself to feel relief. Not yet. But then, as if on cue, Mira's escape plan began to take shape. She had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the perfect distraction. In the chaos of the fight, she glanced toward the hidden exit she had noticed days earlier. Rax, a fellow gladiator who had become her closest friend, was already making his move. They had talked about this moment when they would finally escape. It was risky, dangerous even, but they had no other choice. Mira signaled to Rax, and together, they ran toward the exit. But as they neared it, disaster struck. The guards, alerted by their sudden movement, were already closing in on them. Mira's heart skipped a beat as she realized that their escape plan had been compromised. The alarms blared, and the entrance to the arena was sealed off. They were trapped. Mira's mind raced. She looked at Rax, who was breathing heavily, his face determined but terrified. The escape was slipping away. But in that moment, she knew something else. This wasn't the end. It couldn't be. The last image that flashed before her eyes was of the Earth flag, a symbol of hope that had once seemed so far away. And in her heart, she knew that the UEDF was coming. Mira wasn't alone anymore. The fight for her freedom, and for the freedom of all enslaved children, was just beginning. The screen went black as the tension reached its peak. The audience was left hanging, unsure of what would happen next. Would Mira survive? Would Earth's forces arrive in time? The future of the galaxy was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the Galactic Empire had made a grave mistake, and Earth was about to make them pay. The Galactic Council sat in a high-security chamber, their faces cold and indifferent as the evidence was presented before them. The UEDF had gathered everything: video feeds, intercepted communications, and testimonies from their undercover agents. All of it pointed to one horrifying truth: the Empire had been abducting human children from Earth and enslaving them in gladiatorial arenas. The footage of Mira's fight had been the final nail in the coffin, but the Council, as usual, remained unmoved. Do we really need to waste more time on this? Counselor Vraxar, an alien of considerable influence, sneered at the holographic display. This is the nature of intergalactic warfare. The strong survive. The weak perish. We can't intervene in every skirmish between lesser species. His words echoed through the chamber, but they were met with silence. The truth was undeniable, yet the Council's arrogance and political power were far too great to allow any action. The Galactic Empire had been the dominant force in the galaxy for centuries, and no one wanted to upset the balance of power. The UEDF's plea for help was rejected as swiftly as it was made. They were on their own, but Earth wasn't about to give up. Despite the Council's refusal to act, the United Earth Defense Forces knew what they had to do. Behind closed doors, in the secretive command centers that few knew existed, the UEDF began to prepare for the operation that would change everything. The time for diplomacy had passed. They could no longer rely on weak alliances or the mercy of the Galactic Council. If they wanted to save their children, they would have to fight, and fight hard. The UEDF's fleet, the most advanced humanity had ever built, was already ready for action. Their cloaking devices, stealth technology so advanced that it could make entire ships invisible to even the most sophisticated sensors, had been tested and perfected. They had quantum warheads, capable of wiping out entire fleets with the force of a star's explosion. But that wasn't all. There was one final ace up Earth's sleeve, a weapon so powerful, so dangerous, that it had been kept secret from even the most senior military officials. This weapon was an Nemesis, an artificial intelligence designed to be the perfect strategist. Nemesis had the ability to make decisions faster than any human could, to calculate battle tactics with unerring precision, and to predict enemy movements with a level of accuracy that seemed almost supernatural. Commander Riley stood before the control panel, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew what was at stake: the fate of thousands of children, and the future of Earth itself depended on the success of this mission. His hand hovered over the button that would activate Nemesis. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. Every officer in the room knew that once Nemesis was activated, there would be no turning back. "Do it." Riley's voice was steady, but the weight of his words hung heavily in the air. The AI came to life, its holographic form flickering into existence before them. Nemesis was a cold, calculating entity, its voice devoid of emotion. "I have analyzed the enemy fleet. They are heavily armed, but their tactics are predictable. However, there is one option that guarantees success." Riley's brow furrowed. "What option?" "To rescue one child, we must destroy their entire fleet." The room went silent. It was a bold, dangerous suggestion, one that no one had expected. Earth was about to make a bold move that would either save their children or bring them to the brink of destruction. Nemesis continued, its voice calm and calculated. "The Galactic Empire is not just a political power, it is a military juggernaut. We cannot afford to take any chances. The only way to free Mira and the other children is to eliminate the Empire's hold on this sector of the galaxy. A full-scale assault is the only solution." Riley took a deep breath. He had known the risks, but hearing them laid out so bluntly made them all the more real. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "We're going in." The UEDF began the preparations for the mission, and Earth's most advanced fleet readied itself for what would be the most dangerous operation in human history. Ships were outfitted with cloaking devices, quantum warheads were loaded into their missile bays, and the fleet's best pilots and strategists were put into position. The countdown to the mission had begun, and there was no turning back. On the other side of the galaxy, the Galactic Empire remained unaware of what was coming. The Empire's slave operations continued unabated, the children forced into gladiator pits and cruel training programs. Mira, though she didn't know it yet, was the key to it all. She had become the symbol of humanity's resistance, and Earth was coming for her. As Mira stood in the arena once again, fighting for her life, she could feel something shifting in the air. The constant barrage of blinding lights and alien cheers seemed distant now, like a fading dream. Deep down, she knew something had changed. Maybe it was the way the guards seemed on edge, or the strange silence that hung over the camp. Maybe it was the way the arena's atmosphere felt different, as if the whole place was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Mira continued to fight with the same fierce determination that had kept her alive for so long. Her opponent, a larger alien warrior, fell to the ground with a loud thud, and the crowd roared with approval. But Mira's thoughts weren't on the fight anymore. She was thinking about Rax and the plan they had made to escape. She was thinking about the message that had been broadcast to Earth, the hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would come for them. Back on Earth, the fleet was moving. The UEDF had activated their cloaking technology, and their ships were now invisible to the Empire's sensors. They were preparing to strike, to deliver a blow that would shake the very foundations of the Galactic Empire. But as the fleet neared its target, Commander Riley couldn't help but feel a knot of anxiety in his chest. The plan was risky. One wrong move, and the entire mission could fail. Approaching the Empire's fleet, one of the officers called out, "Quantum warheads ready. Cloak disengaged in 3, 2, 1. At that moment, the UEDF's ships appeared from their cloaked positions, streaking through the blackness of space like streaks of lightning. The Empire's fleet, caught off guard, scrambled to respond. But it was too late. The quantum warheads were launched, and the first wave of explosions ripped through the Empire's defenses. The ships that had once ruled the galaxy were now burning, their massive hulls disintegrating into nothingness. Back in the slave camp, Mira's heart skipped a beat as she saw the sky light up with flashes of fire. Was it possible? Was Earth actually here? Was the Empire finally being taken down? The first wave of the UEDF assault was just the beginning. The battle for the galaxy had begun, and Mira's fight for freedom had only just started. The UEDF's fleet was making its way through the stars, determined to rescue the children, to take back what had been stolen. The war had started, and it would not stop until every last child was freed from the Empire's clutches. The battle had begun, and Earth was ready. Its most advanced fleet, cloaked and silent, slipped past the Empire's outer defenses, heading straight for their flagship system. Inside the sleek, invisible ships, UEDF Marines stood poised for the attack, their faces grim with determination. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the Empire's heart and strike swiftly. As the UEDF ships neared the Empire's flagship, the tension was palpable. Commander Riley stood at the helm of the lead ship, his eyes locked on the holographic display, showing the Empire's vast armada. The flagship was massive, a behemoth of alien engineering, but Earth's fleet had one advantage: stealth. The ships had been specially designed to avoid detection, making them invisible to the enemy sensors. Riley knew this wouldn't last long. Once the first attack was made, the cloak would be useless, and the Empire would retaliate with everything they had. But for now, Earth had the element of surprise. "Engage the orbital bombardment," Riley ordered, his voice unwavering. The order was given, and from the depths of space, Earth's advanced weapons system unleashed a barrage of missiles. The first wave hit the flagship's outer defenses, and the Empire's massive warships shook as they absorbed the strikes. Explosions ripped through the cold void of space, sending debris scattering in every direction. The Empire's fleet was caught off guard, their advanced sensors unable to detect the incoming assault in time. The UEDF had been preparing for this moment for years, and it was paying off. The flagship's shields flickered as the bombardment intensified, creating a chaotic scene of destruction. But it wasn't just about taking down the Empire's fleet. The goal was much bigger: to free Earth's children from the clutches of the Empire. While the battle raged in space, Earth's mesh-suited Marines descended onto the Empire's planets. These heavily armored soldiers, with their towering weaponized exoskeletons, made quick work of the Empire's ground forces. The Empire's soldiers were trained and powerful, but they had never faced anything like this before. Each strike from the Earth Marines sent shockwaves through the enemy lines, shattering their ranks and overwhelming them with brutal efficiency. The battle on the ground was fierce, but Earth's forces were relentless. As the battle on the ground unfolded, Mira, in her prison cell, could feel the vibrations of explosions shaking the entire camp. The sound of battle reached her ears, filling her with a strange sense of hope. She didn't know how, but she knew Earth had come for her. The rebellion, the war, it was all happening now. Inside the arena, Mira had been training for this moment, knowing that one day she would need to stand up not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered under the Empire's cruel rule. She had become the symbol of resistance, the one who could ignite the spark of rebellion. As the fights continued, Mira's heart raced. The other gladiators, once too terrified to stand against their captors, now looked at her with admiration. They saw her courage, and they were starting to believe in something more than their slavery. Slowly, The tide began to shift. Mira, with the help of her gladiator friends, led them in a rebellion against their captors. The gladiators rose together, overwhelming the Empire's guards with their newfound strength and determination. The guards fought back, but the spirit of the enslaved species was unstoppable. The shackles of fear that had once bound them were shattered. The arena was no longer a place of blood and brutality. It had become a battlefield for freedom. But freedom came at a cost. Rax, Mira's closest friend and the gladiator who had fought beside her for years, was in the thick of the battle. He had always been a source of strength for Mira, someone who had kept her grounded in the darkest of times. But now, as the rebellion raged on, Rax knew what needed to be done. He turned to Mira, his expression filled with resolve. "You have to escape, Mira. Take the others with you. I'll hold them off." Mira's eyes widened in disbelief. "No, Rax, we're supposed to escape together." Rax shook his head, his voice low but firm. "This is the only way. I can buy you the time you need. You have to go." Mira tried to argue, but deep down, she knew he was right. She could see the pain in his eyes, the acceptance that this would be his final stand. With a heavy heart, she nodded. "I'll never forget you, Rax." As Mira and the other gladiators made their way toward the exit, Rax turned back toward the guards closing in on them. His hands gripped his weapons tightly, ready to fight until his last breath. The sound of battle echoed around him as he took his position, drawing the attention of the Empire's soldiers. "Go now," Rax yelled to Mira, "before it's too late." Mira hesitated for a moment, her heart torn between her desire to stay and fight and the reality that Rax's sacrifice was the only way they would have a chance. She turned and ran, leading the others to safety as the sound of Rax's final stand filled the air behind her. As she and the other gladiators made their way to freedom, Mira's heart ached. Rax had given everything for her and the others, and she knew his death would not be in vain. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. The battle was far from over, and now that she was free, it was her turn to lead the fight against the Empire. Meanwhile, in the skies above the planet, Earth's fleet continued to engage the Empire. The orbital bombardment had caused massive damage to the flagship, but the battle was far from won. The Empire's fleet was regrouping, their warships firing back with relentless force. But Earth's forces weren't backing down. The tides of war had turned, and the Empire was about to learn that humanity would no longer be a silent victim in the galaxy. Back on the ground, Mira's heart burned with determination. Rax's sacrifice had ignited something within her, a fire that could never be extinguished. She was no longer just a slave. She was a leader, a symbol of hope for all those who had suffered at the hands of the Empire. And she would stop at nothing to see the Empire fall and free every last one of Earth's children. The clash had begun, but this was only the beginning of a war that would change the galaxy forever. The battle was raging across the stars. Earth's fleet had struck hard and fast, but now the Empire was beginning to counterattack. For a while, the UED of ships had been able to stay cloaked, avoiding detection as they launched their devastating strikes. But it didn't take long for the Empire's advanced sensors to catch up. The cloaking devices, once Earth's greatest advantage, were now being steadily outmaneuvered by the Empire's highly sophisticated tracking systems. Without warning, the silence of space shattered as alarms blared throughout Earth's fleet. One by one, the Empire's warships revealed themselves, uncloaking in a deadly dance of destruction. They were everywhere. The massive armadas of the Empire poured into the battle like a swarm of locusts, overwhelming Earth's forces with sheer numbers. The sleek and deadly ships of the UEDF were now exposed, their cloaking devices no longer able to keep them hidden. Commander Riley's voice crackled over the ship's comms, calm but filled with urgency. "All ships, evasive maneuvers. Prepare for full engagement. We got to hold them off long enough to give Mira's team a chance." The UEDF ships scattered, engaging the Empire head-on as the air crackled with energy from the massive weapons that lit up the dark void of space. Explosions rang out as Earth's ships collided with the Empire's formidable forces. Missiles and lasers streaked through the darkness, creating a deadly dance of light and sound. Despite Earth's technological advancements, the sheer size and firepower of the Empire's fleet were beginning to take a toll. In the heart of this chaos, Earth's main dreadnought, the Resolute, was locked in a life-or-death struggle. The flagship of the UEDF was the pride of humanity's fleet, equipped with powerful quantum warheads and an advanced AI system. Yet even this mighty vessel was finding itself in peril. The Empire's flagship had taken aim at the Resolute, its massive weaponry trained on the ship. Every moment counted. Riley watched the status screens as the dreadnought's shields flickered under heavy fire, his fists clenched in frustration. If we lose the Resolute, it'll be over for us. But just as all seemed lost, a voice came over the comms. Mira's, "Commander Riley, we're almost there. We've got this." Mira's voice was filled with determination, but even she knew the risks. On the ground, she and her group of freed gladiators were making their way to the heart of the Empire's communication network. They had a plan, one that could turn the tide of the battle, but it was risky. Mira had to act fast. If she could hack into the Empire's broadcasting systems, she could expose the truth to the galaxy, an act that could destroy the Empire's carefully crafted image of invincibility. Mira stood in front of the glowing terminal, her fingers flying across the interface as her heart raced. She was no longer the helpless slave girl. She had become something far greater, a symbol of hope for the enslaved and the oppressed. The weight of the mission was heavy on her shoulders, but she could feel Rax's presence with her, urging her forward. Behind her, the gladiators and freed prisoners stood watch, ready to protect her as she completed the hack. The Empire's communications tower loomed ahead, a cold monument to their power. But today, it would be their downfall. With a final keystroke, Mira successfully infiltrated the system. The transmission went live, and the footage flooded across the galaxy's largest networks. For the first time, the people of the galaxy saw the brutal truth of what the Empire had been doing. Footage of enslaved humans and aliens, their bodies broken and battered, appeared before every viewer. The scenes were heart-wrenching, filled with screams and the anguish of those who had been forced to fight in the gladiator arenas, their lives stolen from them by the Empire's cruelty. The galaxy was watching. The broadcast was a direct assault on the Empire's carefully curated propaganda. The footage exposed the horror behind their facade of power and control. The Empire, once seen as invincible, now stood exposed. The perfect image they had spent years building was crumbling in front of every species in the galaxy, and as the broadcast continued to spread, it ignited a fire in the hearts of millions. Rebellion sparked up in the most unlikely places. Those who had been too afraid to resist now found their courage, spurred on by the truth that had been revealed. The Empire's leadership was in disarray. High-ranking officers scrambled to contain the damage, trying to regain control of the broadcast. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The truth had been unleashed, and it was spreading like wildfire across the galaxy. Earth's message was clear. The time for submission was over. The Empire's reign of terror was coming to an end. Back in space, the Empire's flagship was closing in on the Resolute, its weapons ready to fire the final blow. But with the exposure of their brutal acts now broadcast to every corner of the galaxy, the tide began to turn. The morale of the Empire's forces began to falter. Doubts crept into the minds of their soldiers, and the once unstoppable fleet found itself less coordinated, more hesitant. "Commander, the Empire's fleet is losing its edge," a tactical officer reported, his voice filled with surprise. "Their formations are breaking apart." Riley saw the opportunity and seized it. "All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship. Now is our chance." The UEDF ships, emboldened by Mira's success, pushed forward with renewed vigor. The Resolute's powerful weapons fired relentlessly, slamming into the Empire's flagship. The enemy flagship's shields buckled, and in a glorious explosion of fire and metal, it fell. The Empire's greatest warship was destroyed, and with it, their hope of crushing Earth's resistance. Mira's heart raced as she watched the battle unfold through the live feed. The image of the Empire's flagship being torn apart was a sight she would never forget. But even in the midst of victory, her mind remained focused. This wasn't over. The Empire was wounded, but not yet defeated. She still had a long road ahead. There were more battles to fight, more enemies to face. But for the first time in a long while, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The galaxy had seen the truth, and now it was up to the people to rise. The turning tide had begun, and the Empire's reign was nearing its end. The battle for freedom was far from over, but the first blow had been struck. And with that, Mira knew one thing for certain: Earth would never again be a silent victim. They would fight until the last breath, and they would win. The stars above Earth were now a battleground, the cold vastness of space filled with explosions and the streak of energy beams as the last stand between the Earth and the Empire unfolded. Earth's forces had been pushed to the brink, their resources dwindling, but they had one weapon left, one final chance to strike at the heart of the Empire. Inside the United Earth Defense Forces Command Center, the atmosphere was tense. The battle had taken a heavy toll on both sides, but the Empire's fleet still loomed large, a terrifying force that seemed unbeatable. However, there was a glimmer of hope. A plan had been set in motion, and the most powerful weapon Earth had ever created was ready to be deployed. The Sun Spear, an energy beam of unimaginable power, was Earth's last resort. It had been kept hidden for years, its existence a secret even from many within the UEDF. The weapon harnessed the energy of the sun itself, focusing it into a single deadly beam capable of piercing the shields of any ship, no matter how advanced. But the power of the Sun Spear came at a cost. Its activation would take everything the Earth's fleet had left. If it failed, there would be no coming back. Admiral Bonner stood at the helm of Earth's flagship, the Resolute, watching the live feeds from the battlefield. He could see the chaos unfolding as the Empire's fleet closed in, their overwhelming numbers threatening to crush the last of Earth's defenses. The battle was on the verge of being lost, but he refused to let it end this way. He knew what had to be done. "Sir, the Sun Spear is ready for deployment," the officer at the communications terminal reported, his voice filled with both hope and fear. Bonner nodded grimly. "Activated. We end this now." The massive energy cannon on the Resolute powered up, its core glowing with the intense light of the sun's energy. A hum filled the air as the beam began to charge. The moment was heavy with anticipation. This was it, the final strike. In space, the Empire's flagship loomed large, its shields crackling with energy as it prepared to retaliate. The ship was massive, its presence overwhelming. But for all its power, it was no match for the Sun Spear. As the weapon charged to full power, Bonner gave the command. "Fire." A blinding beam shot out from the Resolute, its intensity nearly blinding. The energy lashed out like a streak of lightning, cutting through the darkness of space as it sped toward the Empire's flagship. The moment it hit the shields, the entire battlefield seemed to hold its breath. The shields of the Empire's flagship began to flicker, the energy beam tearing through them like paper. For a split second, the Empire's flagship seemed to falter, as if it were unsure whether it could survive this onslaught. Then, with a massive explosion that shook the very fabric of space, the flagship was torn apart. The Sun Spear had done its job. The Empire's pride and symbol of power was no more. Across the galaxy, the Empire's forces paused in stunned silence. They had witnessed the fall of their greatest warship, the loss of the symbol that had once seemed invincible. For a moment, the heart of the Empire seemed to skip a beat. But then, from the heart of the Empire's command ship, a voice boomed. Emperor Zarvox, the tyrant who had brought suffering to so many, spoke with a chilling calmness. "You think you have won." Zarvox's voice was cold and filled with contempt. "You have only scratched the surface of my power. You cannot stop what is already in motion." But even as the Emperor spoke, he knew the truth. His empire was crumbling, and the forces of rebellion were now too strong to stop. His grip on the galaxy was weakening. He could feel it. His throne was slipping away, and no matter how hard he tried to hold on to it, the weight of humanity's wrath was too great. As Zarvox's words echoed across the comms, the reality of his situation set in. Earth's forces had unleashed the full fury of their power, and now the galaxy would no longer bend to his will. "Please, please," Zarvox begged, his voice now tinged with desperation. "I can offer you anything. Power, wealth, control. Spare me, and I will give you everything you desire. Just don't destroy my empire." But it was too late. The galaxy had seen the truth of the Empire's cruelty, the truth of their oppression, their lies, and their greed. There was no going back for Zarvox, no pleading that could save him now. The rebellion had already begun, and the galaxy was no longer afraid. On Earth's flagship, Bonner stood silently as he watched the final stages of the battle unfold. The destruction of the Empire's flagship was a turning point, but it had come at a great cost. His ship, the Resolute, was badly damaged, its systems failing one by one. The battle was almost won, but there was still one last thing to do. Bonner knew that if Earth was to be truly free, the Empire's planetary stronghold had to fall. The war could not end with half measures. There was no room for compromise, no more negotiations. The Empire's hold on the galaxy had to be broken completely. And so, Bonner made the ultimate decision. The Resolute would not survive this final assault, but it would ensure that Earth's victory was sealed. With grim determination, Bonner ordered the ship's self-destruct sequence activated. "Sir, are you sure about this?" his second-in-command asked, concern in her voice. Bonner nodded. "It's the only way. The Empire must fall. We will make sure of it." The self-destruct countdown began, and the crew knew what was coming. As the seconds ticked away, Bonner stood tall, his eyes fixed on the enemy fleet. This was his final act, a martyrdom that would ensure Earth's freedom, that would guarantee humanity's victory. In the final moments before the Resolute's destruction, Bonner sent a message to his crew, a message to the galaxy. Fight for freedom. Fight for humanity. This is the last stand. The Resolute exploded in a burst of light, a final, defiant act of resistance. The shockwave from the explosion hit the Empire's planetary stronghold, causing massive damage to its defenses. The Empire's control began to collapse as Earth's forces pressed forward with unrelenting force. With the destruction of the Resolute and the fall of the Empire's flagship, the battle was over. The Empire had lost. Humanity had won. The cost had been high, but the price had been worth it. As the dust settled, Earth's forces stood victorious. They had fought for their freedom, for the oppressed, and for every soul that had suffered under the Empire's rule. They had paid a heavy price, but in the end, they had achieved what no one had thought possible. The wrath of humanity had been unleashed, and the Empire had been brought to its knees. The final remnants of the Empire had been shattered, their once great war machine now a memory of the past. Earth and its allies had fought a brutal battle, but the outcome was clear. The galaxy, long under the oppressive thumb of the Empire, was now free. And at the heart of this change was the undeniable truth that humanity had risen from the ashes of oppression to become the beacon of hope and freedom in a galaxy that had nearly forgotten what it meant to be free. The Galactic Council, a body of powerful alien leaders that had once been silent in the face of the Empire's cruelty, could no longer ignore the evidence of their tyranny. The broadcasts of the destruction, the enslaved species rising up, and the stories of humanity's resistance spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The Council had no choice but to act. One by one, they began dismantling the Empire's influence, stripping away its power. What had once been a vast network of control and domination was reduced to rubble. The Empire's military presence was disbanded, its governors and generals removed from power, and their colonies liberated. The galaxy was changing, and Earth was at the center of this new order. Mira, the child who had once been trapped in the Empire's gladiator pits, now stood as one of the most powerful figures in the galaxy. Her journey from a frightened prisoner to a symbol of resistance had been a long and painful one. But through it all, she had never given up. The years of suffering, the battles, the loss of friends, especially Rax, had shaped her into something more than just a survivor. She had become a leader, a beacon of hope for those who had been oppressed for far too long. As the news of the Empire's downfall spread, Mira found herself thrust into a position she had never expected. The liberated species, those who had been enslaved by the Empire's brutality, looked to her for guidance. They saw in her the strength and resilience that had led them to freedom. Mira was no longer just a gladiator. She was a voice for the voiceless, the champion of those who had been silenced for so long. The Galactic Council, in its newfound wisdom, invited Mira to a historic peace summit. The galaxy was ready to rebuild, but it needed a leader who understood the pain of its people, someone who could unite the fractured races into a single, harmonious force. Mira was that leader. At the Peace Summit, leaders from all over the galaxy gathered. Aliens of every shape and size, from the peaceful Zorethians to the war-hardened Vexans, sat together at a table that had once been a symbol of the Empire's dominance. Now, it was a symbol of the new order, a united galaxy, free from tyranny. Mira stood before them, her heart heavy with the memories of the countless battles, the lives lost, and the sacrifices made. But there was also a fire within her, a spark of determination that refused to be extinguished. She had seen the worst of the galaxy, the Empire's cruelty, the suffering of those who had been oppressed. But she had also seen the best. She had seen humanity's unwavering spirit, the bravery of those who had stood up against the odds. And now, she would help guide the galaxy into a future where such suffering would never again be allowed to take root. With a calm but resolute voice, Mira addressed the council. The Empire once thought they could break us, that they could enslave us forever. But they were wrong. We are stronger than they ever imagined. Together, we can create a galaxy where no one is forced to live in fear, a galaxy where tyranny has no place. Her words echoed throughout the room, and for the first time, the leaders of the galaxy listened not out of obligation, but with respect. Mira wasn't just a symbol of resistance anymore. She was a leader, a voice for the oppressed, and a beacon of hope for the future. The treaty she proposed wasn't just a peace agreement. It was a new way of life for the galaxy. It called for the liberation of all enslaved species, for reparations to be made to those who had suffered under the Empire's rule, and for the creation of a galactic defense force that would ensure such tyranny would never rise again. The treaty would also establish a council where all species, no matter their size or power, would have an equal voice. The signing of the peace treaty was a moment of history, a moment that would forever be etched into the memories of every species in the galaxy. It wasn't just the end of the Empire. It was the birth of a new galaxy, one where freedom, justice, and unity were no longer distant dreams but a reality. But even as the treaty was signed, Mira knew that this was just the beginning. The road to rebuilding would be long and difficult. There would be challenges ahead, old rivalries to overcome, and new threats to face. But she was ready. Humanity had proven its strength, and now it was time to help guide the galaxy into a future of peace. As the last signatures were written, Mira stepped back from the podium and looked out at the assembly. She saw faces full of hope, faces that had once been filled with fear and uncertainty. She had helped them find their strength, and now it was time for them to build the future together. "You enslaved one of us," Mira said, her voice strong and clear. "But now, the galaxy stands united against tyranny. We will never allow the darkness to take over again." The room erupted in applause. It wasn't just a victory for humanity. It was a victory for the entire galaxy. The Empire's shadow had been lifted, and in its place, a new order had emerged, one that was stronger, united, and determined to never let oppression take root again. Mira's journey had begun in a dark, cold prison cell, but it had led her to become the voice of a new galaxy, a galaxy that would never again bend to tyranny. And as the stars shone brightly above, she knew that the future was theirs to build, a future where freedom reigned and where every species, no matter how small, would have the right to live without fear.